My dad laughed at my business idea until I made millions. Now he wants to partner up. He says the word partner like it tastes expensive. We're sitting at the same kitchen table where he once pushed my business plan back across the laminate and told me, chuckling, to stop playing pretend CEO and get a real job. Now that table is covered in printouts of industry reports I didn't ask him to bring. His reading glasses perched low on his nose as he taps one with a calloused finger. We combine your tech stuff with my experience, he says, eyes bright. 50-50, father and daughter. We could really build something. My coffee has gone cold in front of me because I keep forgetting to drink it. My heart is loud in my ears. There's a weird, hollow feeling in my chest. Like I've stepped into an alternate timeline where none of the last 3 years actually happened. I stare at him for a second too long, and he mistakes it for interest. He leans forward, elbows on the table, smelling like motor oil and cheap aftershave, the same way he has my whole life. Just think, he continues, warming up. You've got the app, the brand, all that online junk. I've got 40 years of running a proper business under my belt. We go into markets you haven't touched, we franchise, we pitch to the big chains. We're family, Em. There's nobody you can trust more than your own old man. He laughs, like that last bit is obviously true. A year ago, that sentence would have knocked the air out of me. Now it just makes my jaw clench. I wrap my hands around the mug to stop them from shaking. The ceramic is cold and rough under my fingers. It was a Wednesday night when I first pitched my stupid little app idea, as he later called it, to the only audience I thought I had. My parents and my laptop screen. I was 26, fresh off quitting my mid-level marketing job at an agency that specialized in making soulless content for companies I didn't care about. I'd rented a car and driven back to my hometown because I'd convinced myself that telling my parents I'd quit in person would somehow make them more understanding. It didn't. Our house hasn't changed much since I was a kid. Same brown couch, same framed photo of me and my brother in school uniforms that my mom refuses to update because you were both so cute then. Dad's workshop is still at the back of the property, a low, corrugated iron building that smells like rubber and WD-40. He's a mechanic, owns his own shop. When I was little, I thought that meant we were rich. When I got older and watched him write checks with a pinched expression at the kitchen table, I realized it meant we just worried about money at a different scale. We finished dinner and Mom did her usual thing where she tried to keep the energy light. So, she said, clearing plates. Emily has some news, Dad grunted, shoveling the last of his potatoes. What kind of news? I took a breath. I left the agency, I said. Last week. He looked up immediately. Left as in, they fired you? No, I said quickly. I quit. I've been working on something on the side and it was getting to the point where I couldn't do both, so I decided to back myself. I'd practiced that little speech in the car about 20 times. It sounded brave in my head. At our kitchen table, under the fluorescent light that buzzed slightly, it sounded thin. Dad put his fork down, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, even though there was a napkin next to his plate. I'm sorry, he said. You quit a good job. For a hobby? It's not a hobby, I said, already feeling my face heat. It's a business idea. Show him, Mom urged, in that way where she's trying to be supportive but is also curious to see how bad the fallout will be. You made those slides, didn't you? So I pulled out my laptop like an idiot giving a TED Talk in a suburban dining room and opened the pitch deck I'd spent nights on. The first slide had my working company name on it. Pit Stop. Catchy, Mom said, squinting. It's an app for independent auto shops, I said, clicking to the second slide. Like yours, Dad. It helps with bookings, inventory, reminders. We already have a booking system, he interrupted. It's called the phone. And a diary from Officeworks, I added, which you forget to fill out half the time. Remember when you double-booked those 2 Hilux services and one of the guys had to sit there for 3 hours? He frowned. That was down to your brother not writing it in, right? Exactly, I said. Humans make mistakes. The app would automate a lot of that. Customers can book online, you get fewer no-shows, they get reminders. You can track parts usage, see what's sitting on your shelves gathering dust. I've already mocked up a version. I clicked to a slide with screenshots. I interviewed 12 shop owners around the city. They all said the same 3 things. They hate no-shows, they hate paperwork, and they don't have time to learn complicated software. So this would be simple. Monthly subscription, no lock-in contract. I was getting into it now, the way I always did when I talked about the problem. That was the part I loved. Taking messy, annoying bits of people's lives and smoothing them out with something you could touch on a screen. Dad listened for maybe 3 more minutes before he started laughing. Not a belly laugh. A short, incredulous one that said more than words. "You want to sell an app to blokes who still write their invoices in triplicate?" He said. "Good luck with that." "Some of them are already using apps," I said. "They're just using ones that aren't built for them. So it's clunky. I can offer something that speaks their language." He shook his head. These guys are like me. They don't have time to be mucking around with their phones all day. They're under cars. They're on their feet. That's the point," I said, trying not to sound like I was begging him to understand. If the tool is good, it saves them time. I'm not asking them to become TikTok influencers. I'm asking them to tap their screen instead of writing the same thing 5 times. He reached over and closed my laptop with one big hand. "You've always been imaginative," he said. "That's great, but imagination doesn't pay the mortgage. You had a stable job, you had super. You threw it away chasing something you saw on the internet." "It's not something I saw on the internet," I snapped. "I've been talking to people, researching, building. I've got 3 shops already using the prototype." "How much are they paying you?" He shot back. "Nothing yet," I admitted. "They're beta testers. They know that." He gave me a look like he'd just won the argument. "Exactly. When they start paying, come talk to me. Until then, it's just a fancy hobby app." "That's not fair," I said, heat prickling behind my eyes. Mom touched his arm. "Bill," she said, a warning in her voice. He shrugged her off gently, but didn't soften. "I've run my own business for 4 decades, he said to me. Kept a roof over our heads by turning up day after day, doing something tangible. People pay me when I fix their car, not when I tell them I might fix it in some theoretical future. You're banking on subscriptions? From mechanics? Come on." He chuckled again, like I'd made a cute joke. "You're clever, Em. Get a job in a big company, climb the ladder. Leave these pipe dreams to kids who don't fancy eating." The thing about being laughed at by your dad is that it hits a part of you that still thinks you're 8 and showing him a drawing. Rationally, I knew he was wrong about a lot of things. Emotionally, it felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed. I closed the laptop properly so he wouldn't scratch the screen and excused myself to the bathroom under the guise of needing the toilet. I turned on the tap and stared at myself in the mirror, willing the tears not to fall. If this were one of those inspirational stories people post on LinkedIn, this would be where I tell you his doubt lit a fire under me, that I stormed out vowing to prove him wrong. The truth is less cinematic. I drove back to my crappy shared apartment feeling small and pathetic, and for a week I half convinced myself he was right. I even opened the job boards again, scrolling through listings for roles I could do with my eyes closed. Brand manager? Content lead? Marketing coordinator? All that beige stability. What pulled me back wasn't spite. It was an email. One of the beta users, a guy named Raj who ran a small workshop in the Inner West, wrote, "Hey, Emily, just wanted to say the app saved my arse today. Had 3 bookings move and I would have stuffed them without the reminders. When are you going to start charging? I feel bad not paying." I stared at that line. I feel bad not paying. And something uncurled in my chest. It was the first time anyone had implied that what I'd built had real value, not just in theory. I sat down, opened my laptop, and wrote back, "Soon, I promise." From there, my life shrank and expanded at the same time. It shrank because I cut almost everything that wasn't essential. Nights out, subscriptions, new clothes. I lived on plain pasta and eggs for a while. My friends would send photos from bars and I'd be in my dressing gown, debugging a feature that kept crashing on older Android phones. It expanded because my brain felt on fire all the time in a way that was exhausting, but also weirdly addictive. I got my first paying customer 4 months later. It was another small shop recommended by Raj. I'd decided on a founding user rate that was probably too cheap but didn't feel like robbery. I sent the invoice and then sat there staring at my email like a lunatic until the notification popped up. Paid. It was only $79, but I took a screenshot and printed it. I stuck it above my desk. When I told Dad, he just grunted. $79, he said. You can't even fill a tank with that. It's monthly, I said. Recurring. He shrugged. We'll see if they're still paying in 6 months. We fell into this weird pattern where I'd drip feed him updates, almost against my will, and he'd poke holes in them. 10 customers? What happens when they all cancel? A small grant from a government innovation program? Waste of taxpayer money? A little feature write-up in an industry blog? Does that actually translate to dollars, or is it just fluff? It wasn't all cruelty. Sometimes he'd slip and say something that sounded almost like pride, then catch himself. Once, when I dropped by the shop to borrow a shifter because my own car was making a noise, I heard him talking to a customer out front. That's my girl, he was saying, showing something on his phone. Yeah, she made an app. For booking services and that. For shops like mine. She did it all herself. Clever she is. When I walked out, he snapped the phone away like I'd caught him. What? He said. You're good with computers. No shame in that. By the end of the first year, I had 50 paying shops. Not enough to be fancy, but enough to be viable. I hired a part-time developer and a support person to handle onboarding. I put them on contractor rates, terrified of committing to real salaries. We worked out of my living room, tripping over extension cords and eating too many discount biscuits. The real inflection point came when a chain of 8 workshops signed on at once. They'd seen the blog piece, then talked to one of my existing users. The meeting was in one of those ugly business parks with no trees. I wore the only blazer I owned. My voice shook answering their questions, but they said yes. I went to the bathroom afterwards and had to sit in a stall with my head between my knees because I felt like I might faint. That deal doubled our revenue overnight. It also made us look bigger than we were. Suddenly, other chains wanted demos. I found myself squinting into my webcam at men with backgrounds full of trophies and branded pull-up banners, explaining why they should trust a tiny company with their scheduling. Some did. Some didn't. Enough did that. 18 months after that first $79 invoice, we crossed $1 million in annual recurring revenue. The number didn't make me feel rich. It made me feel scared. Because now there was something to lose. Investors started sniffing around. At first, I ignored them. The idea of giving up part of my company felt like betrayal, not just to myself, but to every sleepless night I'd had building the thing. Then one of them pointed out that with capital, I could hire properly. Get salespeople, designers, an actual office where the power board wasn't a fire hazard. It wasn't about cashing out. It was about reducing the odds that one bad month would sink us. The day the term sheet came through from a reputable early-stage fund, I forwarded it to Dad, half out of habit. We got an offer, I wrote. They want to invest. He called instead of texting back. They're giving you money for something you already own? He said, suspicious. They get a percentage of the company, I said. In exchange, we get capital to grow. So you're selling your baby, he said. Would have thought you were smarter than that. I almost didn't go through with it. In the end, my team convinced me. We're drowning in support tickets, my developer pointed out. If we don't hire, you're going to burn out. Then what good is owning 100%? We closed the round. The announcement went up on LinkedIn. Some industry rag picked it up. They put my photo in there under the headline, Former Marketer Empowers Mechanics with SaaS Tool. My name, my company, my face. 2 days later, Mom started sending me screenshots of Dad's Facebook posts. He'd shared the article 3 times. Each caption got progressively more embellished. So proud of my girl, one said. Another. Told her from day one she could do anything. I laughed so hard at that one I nearly dropped my phone. Things escalated quickly after that. The investor money did what it was supposed to do. We hired. We built. We fixed things that had been held together with duct tape and prayers. A big automotive brand approached us about an integration. Then a bigger one. When the acquisition offer landed in my inbox, I thought it was spam. I read it 3 times. Showed it to my co-founder. By then I'd brought on my old dev as a formal partner. He whistled long and low. They're serious? He said. Looks like it, I said, feeling like I was in someone else's life. We negotiated for months. Lawyers, accountants, words like earn-out and vesting and non-compete. It was exhausting and exhilarating. When the deal finally closed, the number wired into my account made my breath catch. It wasn't billionaire money, but it was generational shift money. Pay off the mortgage twice money. Fuck you money. If I'd wanted to be petty, I wasn't petty. Not exactly. I told my parents the same day it closed. I drove down, sat at the same kitchen table, slid a printout of the "We're thrilled to announce" press release across to them. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Emily," she said, eyes filling. "Is this real?" "Yeah," I said, dazed. "It's real." "How much?" Dad asked, ever practical. I told them. Mom started crying in earnest. Dad sat back, let out a long breath, then said, "Well, guess your silly app wasn't so silly." It was probably the closest I was going to get to an apology. I took it. Things were weird after that. They alternated between pretending nothing had changed and treating me like I was made of gold. Mom would ask, "Can you afford that?" When I ordered a second coffee, then laugh, "Of course you can. What am I saying?" Dad started introducing me as my daughter, the entrepreneur, emphasizing the word like it was a fancy title. He also quietly started asking questions about systems, about margins, about marketing. One night he called to ask if I thought it was worth it to pay someone to make a proper website for his shop. "Maybe," I said. "Depends what you want it to do." "Bring in customers," he said. "Then yes," I said. "Probably." A seed of an idea must have formed in his head somewhere between that conversation and the one we're having now, with the cold coffee and the stack of printouts. Because today, he is not just a dad proud of his kid. He is a businessman who's realized the world moved a step beyond him and wants back in, using me as a bridge. "So," he says again, tapping one of the papers. "It's an article about how many independent workshops are still using pen and paper systems. We build a new version of your app for tire shops, I want to say, or rural areas. You handle the code and the deals. I handle the on-the-ground stuff. We split it right down the middle. There is a version of this story where I say yes, where we heal everything with a handshake over a joint venture, where I finally get the approval I craved all those nights I was hunched over my laptop in my crappy apartment. But that version would erase all the nights he called my work imaginary. All the times he told me to stop dreaming and be sensible. All the ways I learned to stand on my own because I had to, not because I wanted to. "What exactly are you bringing to the table?" I ask, and my voice comes out cooler than I intend. He blinks. "I told you, my experience. In running your shop, yeah," I say, which I respect, by the way. But this, I gesture vaguely toward the stack of industry reports. This isn't the same game. I've spent years learning this space, talking to hundreds of owners, not just from behind one counter, building and selling a product in it. The company that acquired us already has a roadmap a mile long. I have commitments there. I can't just spin up a competitor on the side because you're bored. "I'm not bored," he says, bristling. "I'm thinking of your future. You can't just sit on that money. It'll disappear." "I'm not sitting on it," I say. "I have a financial advisor. We've got a plan. I'm working with the new owners for the next 2 years. After that, maybe I start something new. Maybe I don't. If I do, it'll be because I have a problem I care about solving. Not because you suddenly decided software isn't a joke anymore." He flinches because he hears it, the accusation underneath. "That's not fair," he says. "I was just worried. You have to understand, from where I was standing, it looked like you were throwing away security." "And from where I was standing," I say, "it looked like you didn't believe I could do anything you didn't understand." We sit there in that uncomfortable quiet, the air thick with all the unsaid things. Mom is at the sink, pretending to rinse a plate that's already clean. I know she's listening. She always is. He sighs eventually, runs a hand through his hair. "There's more gray than there used to be. I'm proud of you, you know," he says, eyes on the table. I probably don't say it right, but I am. You did this thing I can't wrap my head around. It scares me a bit, if I'm honest. That takes some of the air out of my anger. Fear, I understand. I've been living with it as a constant background hum for years. I appreciate that, I say. I really do. And I'm not saying I'll never work with you on anything. If you want advice on automating your shop, I'll help. If you want me to look over numbers before you sign something, I will. But a partnership? With equity and everything that comes with it? No. Why not? He asks, genuinely curious rather than offended now. Because I don't trust you with my work, I think. Because I'm finally in a place where my choices aren't subject to your approval, and I want to keep it that way. Because I know you too well. I know how you react when things get hard, and I don't want to go back to being the kid who has to earn your respect. Out loud, I say. Because the first time I brought you this idea, you laughed. You told me to get a real job. I had to learn to trust myself without you. If we wrapped money and contracts and decisions around us now, I think we'd wreck each other. And I like this talking. Without invoices between us. He looks at me for a long time. There's hurt there, but also something like understanding. So I missed my shot, he says, trying to make it light. You never had a shot? I say, smiling a little despite myself. You're my dad, not my co-founder. He leans back, lets out a breath. Seems I raised someone who knows her own mind, he says. Suppose that's a good thing. Mum finally turns around, drying her hands on a dish towel. It is, she says firmly, looking at him like she's daring him to argue. And you'll still come over for dinner, won't you, love? Yeah, I say. I will. On the drive back to the city, I think about all the things money has changed and all the things it hasn't. My dad is still my dad. Stubborn, proud, occasionally infuriating. My need for his approval has been replaced by something quieter. A desire for respect, which isn't the same as agreement. I realized somewhere between that first $79 invoice and the acquisition wire that the real shift wasn't in my bank balance. It was in the story I told myself about what I was allowed to want. For a long time, I thought the only acceptable dreams were the ones my dad understood. A steady job, a mortgage, retirement at 65 if you're lucky. Wanting more felt like a betrayal. He laughed at my business idea because he was scared of what it meant if I stepped outside that script. That his way wouldn't be the only way. That his sacrifices might be overshadowed by something he never had the chance to try. I made millions, but what I really made was a life that isn't tethered to his fears. Now he wants to partner up, to be part of it in a way he knows. I get why. I also get that saying no doesn't mean shutting him out. It just means the partnership we have will be the one we're actually equipped for. Father and daughter, two flawed people learning very slowly how to see each other as adults. The money sits in accounts and funds and boring, well-diversified portfolios. My dad sits in his shop office, finally using a basic version of the software I built, grumbling about it when it logs him out. I sit somewhere between the two worlds' blue-collar roots and tech world future, knowing that the most important thing I own isn't my company or my net worth. It's the ability to choose who I tie myself to. And I'm choosing this time to keep my dad in my life as exactly what he is. Not a partner, not a boss. Just a man who laughed when I told him my dream, and who now, very awkwardly, is trying to clap.